Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So before we get started, I just want to shout out our latest patrons, Hero, Falzi, Felix, Kendall, and Ryan. Thanks so much for supporting us, guys. We really appreciate it. If you're not already, consider supporting us on Patreon. It helps us a ton in delivering you guys new content, especially in times like these, strange times around much of the world. So today's topic was one that I didn't really plan on covering because it kind of just came out of nowhere in the past couple days. I'm not sure if everyone's seen the news, so I'm going to break it down. It's about a new intercity / interregion / intra-region railway in Canada, which is huge news, especially because it's not actually in Eastern Canada, it's in Alberta. Now, if you're not from Canada, which I think more and more of our viewers are not, I just want to quickly summarize where Alberta is. Alberta is Canada's second westernmost province. The territories are in the north, the provinces are in the south. Alberta just kind of butts up against the Rocky Mountains to the east of British Columbia. Now, of course, Calgary, Alberta's largest city, is only a short distance away from Banff National Park, which is an incredibly famous national historic site as well as kind of a nature site where the Rocky Mountains kind of open up into a valley. It's a beautiful location. There's Lake Louise, lots of famous sites, skiing, all kinds of great stuff in the Banff area. But it's a huge tourist attraction. And so a couple years back, when I was just starting the channel, I made a video with Alberta Regional Rail, who are great folks that were advocating for a rail link between both Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta's two largest cities, and between Banff and Calgary for purposes of tourism as well as some commuter use. And so it's so exciting to be able to say that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Alberta to study the line between Calgary International Airport and Banff. And so I'm going to break it all down in the video. So I know it's just a memorandum of understanding to study the route, and you might not think that's that big of a deal, but I really think this is a route where the business case is very strong. If you've been following the space for a little while, you'll know that the pieces have been kind of falling into place. A group in Banff acquired some land near a train station and transit center there to create a new transit hub. There's been talk for quite a while of linking Calgary's International Airport with the downtown core of Calgary, which is quite a large business hub and which is struggling at the moment. And so obviously a big project like this would be of benefit because we'd get some jobs in and also just create a more attractive business environment in downtown Calgary, which has a ton of open office space right now. And so doing anything we can to make it a more attractive business environment is fantastic. Now, if you're wondering why I think this business case is so good, it's because the line is so simple. Essentially how it would work is you'd take the existing Canadian Pacific Freight Railway right-of-way, which operates through the center of downtown Calgary, all the way out to Banff and then further along west to British Columbia, and you would add 1 to 2 tracks in that same corridor along much of its length. Now, why I say 1 to 2 tracks is because train frequencies are kind of variable. So on the section out to Banff, where there would be a total of 5 stations, downtown Calgary, Cochrane, Morley, Canmore, and Banff, all cities kind of along the route, with Canmore being quite close to Banff. This section would receive 8 trains a day, so a pretty strong intercity service. What that would look like is some trains going in and out all day long, and what would be fantastic about that is it has several potential uses. People from Calgary could use the train to get to Banff or Canmore or any of the other cities along the route for things like sightseeing, maybe a weekend trip, that sort of thing. You also have travelers landing at Calgary International Airport who would be able to ride a train through the downtown core of Calgary all the way out to Banff, which is again super convenient and kind of capitalizes off that market that you know exists wherever there's tourist locations near a major city and there's always a ton of buses running back and forth. This rail line would be able to capitalize off those buses, and so it would be a fantastic decision in that sense. And finally, you have the benefit that the line could be used for commuters from communities to the west of Calgary, like Cochrane, Morley, Canmore, and Banff, to commute into Calgary or even just take trips into the city on weekends or whenever people feel like it. So there's just a lot of good uses of the train line and the service, which is why I think in that sense, the train line and service have a really good business case. Of course, though, the point of the study is to determine whether that is a factually good business case. Now, before I get a bit more into the route, I do want to talk about why else I think this is a big deal. First of all, the Canadian Infrastructure Bank was basically created to speed along high priority, green energy, positive, environmentally friendly projects where a lot of money was being funneled in, and a lot of these projects are giant P3s or kind of linked in with the private sector. And so it's kind of an alternative procurement model agency that's trying to focus funds into major transit and infrastructure projects. Some examples of projects that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is working on include the REM project in Montreal, which I've covered extensively, as well as GO Regional Express Rail. So they are funding huge projects, and so it's really cool to see Alberta kind of seeing some of that funding starting to roll in. Now, I will note that people are kind of questioning the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. I actually think it's a good thing, because if you look at a lot of countries in Europe and Asia, for example, they often do have infrastructure banks like the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. And part of the reason we haven't really seen any projects completed yet is because of the scope of the projects. REM and Regional Express Rail are 6 to 10 plus year projects, and so the bank was created in 2017, and so it just hasn't existed long enough for a lot of these mega projects to come to fruition. I know that had been a point in the news, and so I wanted to mention it. Now, let's get into kind of the nitty-gritty details of what I imagine this line looking like. Of course, nothing is really confirmed yet, but I think I can give you a pretty good idea of what I expect to see on the line. So when we look across the entire length of the line, it's 130 kilometers. Let's start on the, in my opinion, actually less interesting section out to Banff. So in each of the stops along the route, we'd see a new station, probably only a single platform, perhaps a double platform, like an island configuration at some of the stations. That's because you wouldn't need to actually have that many platforms at a lot of locations, because again, there will be 8 services per day, and so it's not a ton. That being said, of course, in the future, say more services want to be run, it should be pretty scalable and easy to add more platforms and more passing tracks to increase the frequency in the future. Though I think you could probably do a lot with just a little bit of infrastructure. As I mentioned, I would expect most of the trackage to be single track, expanding out the CP corridor, and potentially double tracks in places where you want to have a passing loop. So essentially, trains going both directions only really need one track. It's when 2 trains meet that they need a passing loop, so one train can go to one side and one can go to another, and they can pass each other. Given the fact that, again, there is only 8 services per day between Banff and downtown Calgary planned, you wouldn't need that many passing loops, and so the environmental impact really shouldn't be too huge. If you look at the right-of-way, it's pretty wide in most places, and I think it wouldn't be a problem to add an additional track. You wouldn't have to cut down too many trees, nothing like that, and so I think it's really attractive in that sense. Now, if you're wondering what I think the stations should look like, they don't need to be massive, because again, right now the services aren't too frequent. It seems like the Banff station will probably be covered by kind of people in Banff who have a vision for the station, and there is good connecting transit services and other bus services in the Banff area, so I imagine that station would probably be a bit bigger, but it would be a nicer commuter rail style station in my opinion, and you would likely have things like canopies, it would be fully accessible, all those nice features, and it would probably be scoped for a place where it gets cold, because it does get cold in Banff for much of the year. So now that I've talked about the western leg of the project, let's talk about what I think is really the most interesting part, which is the eastern section, which would connect between downtown Calgary and Calgary International Airport. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I've talked about, whenever I've mentioned Calgary, I've always mentioned the fact that it's a little unfortunate that the blue line of the Calgary LRT doesn't connect up to the airport. Of course, this kind of seems like the natural thing to do, but if it's possible and if the authorities are willing to add some tracks in the CP corridor up to the area near the airport, then that route actually starts making a ton of sense, especially since it would be an express service. A lot of the time, the issue with these airport rail connections is that they aren't super fast, and while it is useful for people along the blue line to be able to connect up to the airport, having a very quick travel time between the airport and downtown is super attractive, and this line would have just that. The line would likely start somewhere around the Calgary Tower in downtown Calgary, where there's already some actual platforms that exist. I imagine they would probably be torn out and nice modern platforms would be built, but it just goes to show you that there is space. And there's space along much of the corridor, so I don't think space and width is really a huge issue. At most, we need to add 2 tracks, but again, for most of the length of the entire corridor up to the airport, we'd only probably need to add 1 track. Also, given the travel time is not that long, only about 12 to 15 minutes between downtown Calgary and the international airport, which is actually fantastic for a rail link. If you look at Vancouver, it's 25 minutes, Toronto's 25 minutes, Montreal's around 25 minutes. So Calgary would probably have the fastest air rail link in the country. Of course, Ottawa is also building an air rail link, but I have my issues with that, as you've probably seen. So essentially, as I was mentioning, the line would start at the CP Rail Yard in downtown Calgary, near the Calgary Tower, travel out over the Bow River to the north, and then continue along the CP Rail Corridor. Fortunately, because this is a freight rail corridor, a lot of these crossings have already been grade separated, so there's only 2 or 3 grade crossings on the entire route, and they're not over major streets, which is fantastic. So when you start to think about it, there isn't actually that much major infrastructure that needs to be built. You need to lay down some tracks, do some signaling, and you're pretty much ready to go. So as you are going along the corridor towards the airport, once you get near Airport Trail, there's actually a ton of space on the western side of the alignment, which is where I think the new tracks would be added to the west. Perhaps you would shift the existing tracks, but I think that's where it makes the most sense because of the layout of the trackage along the route. Once you get near to Airport Trail, you would go onto an elevated guideway of sorts, and then you'd cross into the airport lands. The station could be at grade, though in my opinion, the study will probably sort out what the best location for the station would be. A lot of the area to the north of Calgary International Airport is actually just parking lots, and there's a lot of room, so I don't think there would be a huge issue finding a pretty convenient station location right close to the terminals. And this would be pretty awesome. Pretty much out of the blue, Calgary could be getting the best air rail link in Canada. Well, depending on how you look at it. So, to get into a bit more nitty-gritty details about that service, while there is going to be 8 trains per day traveling all the way to Banff, trains would otherwise be stopping in downtown Calgary and then returning to the international airport on a roughly 20-minute service all day long. 20 minutes isn't the most frequent, and I would like to see that improved to every 15 minutes, which I think is totally doable with the given infrastructure. I often say that 15 minutes is kind of the basic frequent service, and given the fact that the Up Express, the REM, the Canada Line all operate at above or at 15-minute frequencies, I think it should be kind of the target for this service, but in the Memorandum of Understanding announcement, they said every 20 minutes. There's actually not a huge difference in terms of what you would need to build, so I'm going to say hopefully around a 15-minute service. 20 minutes is still pretty good for an express train, especially given the fact that the train to downtown would only take between 10 and 15 minutes anyways, so it would be super fast. Now, a few more details that I want to mention. One question I expect will be asked is this route going to be electrified? My best guess is no, and while I would like to see it electrified in the long term, I think that not electrifying it simplifies it so much that it probably would make more sense from the business case analysis perspective to not electrify, especially given the kind of low frequencies. Of course, it is always possible that part of the line is electrified, say from the international airport to downtown Calgary, where frequency is high and electrification makes decent sense, and then the section to Banff could be run with the same trains, but just using diesel mode. We could buy bi-mode trains. If you're curious what kind of trains I think we would probably get for that route, something like what the O train has in Ottawa would make a lot of sense, but a bi-mode version. They do exist in places like the United Kingdom and other countries, so that type of train definitely exists. I'd imagine it would be a 4-car, roughly 80-meter train, so really in line with what Ottawa is upgrading their current system to, and I think that a low-floor train, again, makes the most sense. If you look across North America, Dallas, Austin, San Francisco, lots of places have built low-floor diesel multiple unit routes, and so I think that probably makes the most sense for Calgary as well. So with that in mind, this would actually be a really unique service because these type of low floor diesel multiple unit trains that we see popping up all over North America, they haven't really been used on a longer 130 kilometer route like this, and so I think it would be quite cool to see. I really don't think we'd be seeing locomotive hauled trains because especially the section between the airport and downtown Calgary doesn't seem like they would really fit, and it seems like a diesel multiple unit would just be a better idea for performance and other reasons. And again, we do have lots of nice options like the new Flirt trains that Ottawa is getting, or even like the Alstom trains that Ottawa currently has. These trains can feature washrooms, luggage racks, etc., and so they would be really well suited to that type of longer distance service. It would also be the first time in Canada that we have a service that's kind of a mix of intercity rail operating to an international airport, so that is really cool. Now, if you're wondering what I think the service would require in terms of number of trains, I'm guessing 5 or 6 trains. I think the service between the international airport and downtown Calgary could be operated with 3 trains, and then you would probably have 2 trains, or 1 or 2 trains operating out to the west to Banff during the day, with 1 spare that could be in rotation. And there's lots of space along the alignment as well, which is nice. So I think that finding space for a garage, maintenance facility, it would all be pretty simple. Given this entire project, I'm just really happy and excited. It seems like a very good solution exists for the problem that Calgary wants to solve, an express train from the airport to the downtown core, as well as a longer distance connection to a major tourist hub. I think that it can be done quite economically because the right-of-way exists. And by the way, if you're wondering, this has been done before in Canada. GO Transit's Lakeshore East route in Toronto actually included 2 additional tracks in a freight rail corridor to operate frequent service, and that allowed GO Transit to operate now up to every 15-minute service on the route. And so it's not really something that hasn't been done before, and so I think it's quite possible for this project to be completed, and I think it's super exciting because Calgary and Alberta really do need regional and long-distance rail, and this is kind of the first piece in what could eventually be a link further north to Edmonton. You'd probably be using the same rail line, so it all makes a lot of sense. And connecting up to Banff makes a ton of sense too, because obviously there's a ton of demand. So I hope you guys enjoyed my summary / predictions for the Alberta, let's call it the Rocky Mountain Express, something like that, between Calgary International, downtown Calgary, and Banff. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below, consider subscribing, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.